Good afternoon and welcome to the 21st episode of ProShip ParcelCast, a carrier's guide to expecting the parcel delivery unexpected with TForce. With us today, we have Justin Cramer and Dean Mills from TForce. Good afternoon, Justin and Dean.
Good afternoon, Jerri. Dean Mills here, Vice President, Sales and Marketing with Tforce Logistics. Thanks so much for having us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Justin Cramer with ProShip, co-founder.
Okay, so as we talk today about expecting the parcel delivery unexpected, Dean, can you give us a little bit of information on who is TForce and maybe define the type of carrier that TForce is?
Yeah, absolutely. Tforce Logistics is part of TFI International. TFI International is our parent company, and it's one of the largest transportation companies in North America. About $10 billion annualized, publicly traded, Toronto, New York stock exchanges, and really focused on the LTL, the truckload, the parcel, and then where my business plays in services is in the final mile space. So specifically with respect to Tforce Logistics, we're North American in scope. We have about 80 brick and mortar branch locations across North America. We are where the population is, and we service that final mile niche, both in the B2C, e-commerce, parcel, direct to consumer. We also are quite busy in the B2B business, as well as financial, medical, big and bulky. So the final mile space is very diverse, and we cover several aspects of it. I know we're going to get into a lot of the parcel, e-commerce, direct to consumer discussions today. So that's a little bit about who we are and where we fit in the space.
Let's jump right into it. Regarding riding this pandemic wave, what did the pandemic look like from the carrier side?
Yeah, it's interesting to look back on it. It seems like yesterday, and then it seems very far away at the same time. Initially it was, let's make sure all hands are on deck. We know what we're dealing with. What can we service? What can we not service? How can we create some capacity from some aspects of our business that weren't being utilized so that, other necessary areas could get serviced? So a lot of, information grabbing, understanding kind of what the current state is, how do we redeploy solutions, et cetera, to kind of help things out. And then obviously we saw this massive acceleration of parcel volume, right? Because, people were at home, stores weren't closed, traditional markets. So we saw that acceleration or skyrocketing of direct to consumer demand. So, from our side, it really escalated our growth in that area, out of necessity. And you know what it's like when you have to do something, you just find a way to make it work, right? So, it was and I guess we're still on the tail ends of things, but it's been very much a roller coaster ride, dealing with the spikes in volumes, dealing with the capacity restraints, being able to find the drivers to make the deliveries, and then fast tracking with customers to get integrations. It was a very hectic time, but one that thankfully we were able to come through, help a lot of businesses, and it probably took our business further faster in terms of escalating our trajectory of how we provide services in that direct to consumer space. It's kind of leveling out now, and I know we'll get into some of the current state challenges, but definitely a roller coaster ride the last 2+ years.
Right. Justin, do you think the economy or inflation fit into that somehow?
Oh, of course. Let's face it, the multi-carrier market in the United States was made back in the 90s with the UPS strike. Really meant that people couldn't be single carrier anymore. And as we start to see the growth in e-commerce during the late, early 2000s, it really started to reinforce that, not just for your largest shippers, but for even your mid-sized shippers, where it started to make more sense to have multiple carriers. But we also started to see more, rather than just the general deliver to all 39,000 zip codes, you started to see more specific carriers start to come into play, which allowed shippers to model their flow, their capacity, and distribute that more intelligently across multiple carriers. And yes, the pandemic basically turned that up to 11, if you will.
Peak seasons differ now. They're different now. and this upcoming peak season is going to be different. Are you projecting capacity to exceed demand as far as Tforce is concerned?
Yeah, again, we're faced with a new set of challenges, I think, this year. To Justin's point, kind of the acceptance of carrier diversification also accelerated the last couple of years when there was those capacity crunches that were there, right? A lot of volume, not enough capacity. Shippers were certainly open or more open to talk to more carriers, diversify the risk, find capacity wherever they could to fulfill demand. I mean, this year is going to be a little bit different, I think, quite honestly. I mean, we've got a lot of economic uncertainty going on right now, consumer confidence, inflation. We've had inventory issues the last, year and a half or so, spurred on from the pandemic. So I know shippers and retailers and e-tailers have been, in some cases, stockpiling some inventory so they're ready for peak season. We've heard, reports about a quicker start of peak season because people want to spread their spending. So capacity has not been as big of a deal this year, quite candidly, for us, and I'm sure for others in the space. There's certain areas and certain pockets of the country or the continent, for that matter, that there are still some limitations. But I think we're going to be okay. I think it's going to be, region specific. A lot of planning. The volume has, leveled out a little bit with some of the normal shopping practices back in place. People are going back to retail a little bit more. So our customers, others that I've talked to in the space, have seen their in-store volumes go back up a little bit and the online, sales drop a little bit. So it's normalized, which again is going to help with the capacity piece. So yeah, shippers have diversified, seems to be a little bit more capacity, volumes have maybe normalized a little bit more. So at this stage, right, the first part of September, I don't see capacity being quite as big of an issue this year.
The market does have some mixed signals out there. If we look at how full warehouses are, the amount of consolidation we've seen in warehouses, and the fact that a lot of major retailers were unable to get a particular season worth of goods out, and rather than wholesaling them, they've chosen to hold and release them again. Now, this does mean that they're kind of in a race as to whether or not they can reduce the amount of stuff they have in their warehouses enough to hold all the capacity that they need for peak season, because we've seen a lot of retailers go away from just in time and more to I have it on hand. That could lead to some fluctuations, but I'm with Dean on this. In general, you're not going to see the wholesale capacity concern that we saw during the prior 2 years of the pandemic. What I do expect we're going to see, though, is lane-specific temporary capacity concerns. You're going to have, let's say you've got a Dallas facility, and you may have one of the nationals call you up and say, hey, from Dallas, we need you to stop using us to Nevada or to the West Coast or something of that nature. And of course, if you've diversified your carriers, that shouldn't be a problem. You should just be able to shift to the other carriers that are providing that particular lane for you. So yes, there's going to be some roughness in the road, but this is stuff that a lot of large retailers experienced pre-pandemic. So we're hopefully going to come down to a point where it's just that day-to-day operational concern, not the systemic concern that we had throughout 2000 and 2021.
So Dean, we've talked about this before regarding carrier diversification, and you mentioned something to us, something that you refer to as carrier rationalization. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an evolution, of what we've seen the last couple of years. I talked about that need or dependency to diversify reliance on, a traditional carrier strategy. That's expanded, that's accepted. A lot of shippers over the past 2-3 years have added carriers to their mix, to their solution set, whether it's in regions or lanes or for different service levels or what have you. With some of the leveling in capacity right now, and a lot of the shippers, covering all bases to make sure that they did have the capacity, the carriers, the lanes, the services. It's almost that little bit of rationalization, right? Where they're looking at, okay, what do we have in our solution set? Do we have the right carriers in the right regions, offering the right, transit time, service levels, with the right visibility, with the right customer service interaction? So it's kind of like, okay, we covered what we needed to do to match that volume. Now it's like take inventory of what we need, what our customers are asking for, what they need, and then kind of rationalizing the solution set. So it's been an interesting year because, again, there's been a great acceptance to add more carriers to the mix. Now it's a matter of making sure they have the right carriers in the right regions, as I said, with the right services. So we'll see where that shakes out, but I think all shippers that we deal with today are definitely rationalizing who and how they use those offerings from their carrier partners.
This carrier rationalization strategy, how can it help future-proof our customers' parcel shipping program, anybody's parcel shipping program?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of being able to look at what you've got and then match it up against what your customers are asking for and what they need, right? So again, the doors have been opened a lot the last few years with a lot of choice in the space, and I'll say that acceptance to offer new types of carriers or carrier models and service offerings. So I think it's absolutely added to the value, that the end consumer gets, and it helps with the carrier strategies of the shippers. There's a lot of different options. I mean, different tech platforms, different aggregators, consolidators, combining first, middle, final mile solutions, or just doing a final mile, to kind of complement what they would get from a larger national provider. So I think it's absolutely helped. And again, I think it's going to continue to unfold and evolve just based on what the economy is going to drive and how the consumers react and how that translates into volume, along with the expectations of what customers want. So they want it quick, they want to have complete visibility, right? And they want to be able to choose that level of service sometimes as well. So choice is always a good thing, and the shippers having that and then rationalizing that against what their customers are telling us is only making, I think, everyone better.
Yeah, and to add to that, as we expect to see this capacity constraint continue to lower, really, I think that shippers need to take some of their downtime and actually evaluate what are your real needs. Do you have same day needs? Is it a big and bulky need? Is it primarily to the cities? It is a rural solution. What is it that you need? And then look at the carriers that you have. No one carrier can do everything anymore. Look at the carriers you have, remove the carriers that are redundant, and add the carriers that are actually going to provide you with the functionality your customers need that year. And that's probably going to change the year after that and the year after that. So it's no longer a set it and forget it every 3 to 5 years I negotiate a new contract. Now it's really look at what you need every year and deploy the partners, carriers, deploy the partners that you need to keep your customers happy at a cost that works for your products.
Just one thing to tag onto that, I think it's a great point, right? And it's fast tracked our strategy at Tforce Logistics as well too, because things have changed so quickly. So we have maybe have dealt with a customer, a shipper, in our northeastern U.S. region, and they need something different now because they've opened up a new FC in the southwest region or in the southeast or in Texas to get their demand closer to the customer. So to your point, it's not a, put it in place, let it run for 3 or 4 years. Like, shippers are constantly evolving. And then what that has forced us to do faster is evolve our strategy, saying, okay, the demand to have, more footprint coverage in the state of Texas is there. Let's evolve that quicker, or let's connect one region to another region within our network. So again, demand is happening in real time, and I think the shippers are acting quicker, and that's kind of pushing carriers like us to act quicker. And again, back to that rationalization piece, then what do they need, and then getting it set up accordingly. So it's really fascinating to see how quickly things are changing on all aspects of the business, from shippers to the consumer demand and how the carriers are reacting.
What homework can shippers do to prepare for peak 2023 and beyond? Gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I mean, I think just getting the best handle as possible on what their forecast is going to be. But that's been a real challenge this year, admittedly. I mean, you know, again, we go into what we call our peak planning, typically mid to end July. We're still waiting on some customers to get their forecast together because they're trying to understand it. I think the shippers are looking at, okay, look at all their carrier partners that they're currently set up with, have integrations with, or are trading with today. You know, looking at their capacities and then making sure they've got, you know, volume set up to be transported with those carrier partners. So, you know, one of those questions that we're asking, you know, is there going to be enough volume to go around? And that's perhaps another part of rationalization. If shippers have set up with, you know, 7 to 10 carriers as an example, you know, how are they going to split their volume across the different carriers so that everyone can, you know, make sure they deliver a great experience and one that's got the expectations of all involved. So I think the shippers are doing as well a job as they can, just understanding what their customers are demanding, coming up with their forecasts, and then working, I think, with a lot of transparency. At least we've had that experience this year with our customers, being very transparent. If they know, they know. If they're not that confident in their forecasts, they're letting us know as well too. So a lot more consistent, reoccurring cadence of our communication, and I think that's what is going to have to be a key element this peak. Is like, okay, let's see it almost, you know, week by week, bi-weekly. What are we seeing? Where's it going? How can we read and react accordingly? So a lot of communication and try to take the data they have and make some sense out of it so we can all plan for success.
Shippers have already pretty much added and done their carrier diversification. Now they're rationalizing their carriers. Is it too late to add carriers now, Justin?
Unless you've already got that contract in place, it probably is. So let's face it, we're in the middle of September as we're recording this. Unless you've got that well underway, you're probably not going to get that carrier live unless you're a relatively small shipper. You're not going to get that carrier live before. I'm with Dean. I do think that we're going to see a pull forward. We're going to see some of the volume pull into October. So October is kind of going to be the slow start of peak. But what you can do is you can plan for the future. And to plan for the future, you need to record appropriately. And what I mean by this is now is the time to start either identifying an individual or start informing your managers that they should be recording wins and losses. They should be recording good and bads on a weekly basis. Okay, not monthly. That's only having 3 recording points between now and January is not a great thing. But if you can get a weekly, these are the things that worked well, these are the things that didn't. By the time you get into January and maybe you're exhausted from all of that work, you've had a lot of lane switches that have had to occur because of odd peaks happening within particular carriers. We don't want to just remember the worst of it and try to fix that. Instead, more importantly, we want to ensure that we remember what worked, because if it worked, we need to retain that. The last thing we want to do, and unfortunately I've seen this with several customers, is they've thrown the proverbial baby out with the bathwater by not retaining the good stuff and by just trying to replace everything in order to kill the bad stuff. So if you start that recording now, if you start looking at the good and the bad, by the time you get to January, February, when it's time to roll sleeves up and plan for the following peak season, you're going to have that balance that you need such that you can work with your vendors, whether that be multi-carrier shipping software like ProShip, whether that be your shippers like TForce. You're going to be able to communicate with them better in a way that's going to ensure that year over year, especially as I mentioned that we're probably going to see more fluctuation in the carrier market, or at least how you use carriers year over year based upon your needs. You're going to have a better understanding of that, which means you're going to have a better year over year because of it. So that's what I would say.
Pay attention, record the data. Now, Dean, when a shipper is rationalizing the use of TForce, what do you think they should be considering?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I think, you know, around the question of is it too late to start with that? I mean, what we have seen the trend this year is that a lot of, I'll say, additions of a carrier an augment of a new service have been pushed back a little bit. So candidly, we are still onboarding a couple customers that are going to be new. So it's a little bit late for our comforts level, but we're going to make it work this year. And again, I think it's just the uncertainty that was in the market all year, to be frank, right? And shippers were delaying decisions and rationalizing what they were going to do just based on, whatever data points they could get to make those decisions. So again, the 2x volume, 2.5x volume that we typically see from shippers in peak. I mean, I don't know if we'll see that this year. It remains to be seen. We've seen more level volumes throughout the year. I mean, people consistently shop. But I think Justin makes a good point of just, understanding, recording your wins and losses, what works, the good, the bad, the ugly sort of thing. And if they understand, and plan to go into it for success, and then make adjustments, optimize along the way, I think that's important. Again, I'll go back to just the transparent communication. I mean, as partners, everyone has to work and talk together. So if things are changing from a shipper's perspective, just be upfront with your carriers, right? If the volume's not there that you were expecting, let the carriers know ahead of time so they can adjust and adjust our planning and execution as well too. So real-time communication, transparent communication, being aligned on what the expectations are for service, the operational SOWs. I mean, the block and tackling stuff of making it work. You can't get too far wrong by sticking to the basics on that. But I think all those things combined, just keep it real and keep it open, and I think things will come off fairly well this year.
Is Tforce still onboarding customers?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, our onboarding schedule usually stops right about now. Candidly, we have a couple of customers that are coming on in the early part of October, which is a little bit late for us. To Justin's point, if the rates aren't set, the contracts signed, and the integration work already underway to get that up and running, it's going to be pretty tight. Having said that, we're still getting, believe it or not, the odd inquiry. We do have the ability, if it's a small shipper, again, to Justin's point, to look at bringing them on in certain markets. But we're pretty well set. I mean, our onboarding schedule is filled up now, unless there's a couple little tuck-ins that could slide in an existing market. We're pretty well set for the season.
Good. Any final thoughts you want to leave listeners with, and what's the bottom line?
I'll maybe take a shot at it first. I mean, from my perspective, the final thoughts are, we've got to learn every day. We've got to be aware of what's going on every day. We have to be mindful of what the consumers are looking for, what their expectations are. I think the reaction time of shippers and carriers has been fantastic. There's been, a tremendous amount of movement the past couple of years. One of the biggest things I've seen is that getting inventories closer to the consumer has allowed for this diversification strategy, and now this rationalization, 2.0, if you will, to kind of follow. But getting inventory close to the consumer, I think, is a good thing, because it gives you options, right? It gives you more flexibility. It gives everyone more options that way. So again, from a carrier's perspective, certainly appreciate, and I'll say it again, just that open, consistent, transparent communication. Try to create those win-win relationships, and without that communication, it's going to make it a challenge. So, from our perspective, final thought is we're ready. We're probably over-prepared, which is a good thing, because we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, and we're excited to see our customers succeed this peak season.
Great advice. Justin?
Yeah, I'd really like our listeners to take away two things. Number one, we are at the new norm. We no longer have to panic rationalize our carriers, but we should continuously be rationalizing those carriers. It's not something, again, like I said earlier, there is no more set it and forget it, and we'll deal with it in 3 to 5 years when contracts come up. It really, what we've seen with the successful shippers is they are now rationalizing on an annual basis at a minimum, and some of them on a more continuous basis. Number two, if you are going to have an improved logistics strategy over time, Now is the time to start recording for your peak season. The wins, the losses, the good, the bad. And that's really the 2 points that I would like to make as part of this. Jerri?
Awesome, thank you. If you want to learn more, visit us at ProShipInc.com or TForceLogistics.com. Thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, just a reminder that you can reach ProShip at sales@ProShipInc.com or call 800-353-7774. We hope you join us in early December for our next ProShip ParcelCast. Thank you and have a great day.